Well, we just want to welcome everybody to our monthly webinar. I'll probably ask everybody to mute their mics as we get started, and when we get to question and answer periods. We'll invite you to unmute at that time. Today we're going to be going over the manufacturing module. So that's kind of the all things under the manufacturing menu. So we sure appreciate you all jumping in with us today. For privacy concerns, let everybody know I am recording. And we do that just so that we can share the webinar to those that couldn't make the specified time, date type of thing, so they can find it later on our vlog to get that additional information. So I'm going to give just another minute or two as people are jumping on. By means of introduction, if everybody doesn't know, Daniel Clark is in charge of our technical support. And so he'll be jumping in to help with our discussion as part of this. Claire, that's me. I'm the guy with the gal's name. That's why you always see Claire Donald added in there. I'm one of the original creators of the software. And so I've been working on this software for over 20 years now. So that's kind of a crazy number. Our Techno Resources has been in business. In June, it will have been 28 years ago we started the business. And the focus of our company is really small manufacturing companies, small businesses, to try to bring the higher complexity software to make it a reasonable cost and help you implement it. So today's topic is the manufacturing module. I'm going to jump right in and get going with our discussion. We're going to go through an agenda. We're going to go through some history, purpose of the module, options that are available, some setup, different methods and methods of use. So that's kind of our agenda for today. In the end, we'll get into some question and answers too as people before we sign off. Introduction, the manufacturing module is second only to the inventory management type or inventory module in our program as far as being core. If you don't use the manufacturing module, I kind of want to know why, because it is so pivotal to making what our software is. And so it's just of high importance. And it's basically where we combine labor, material, outside processing into the system and bring that together. So why not work orders? Okay, everybody, you bust my chops about this for the last 20 years. Why did I not call it work orders? Okay, well, probably should have, but it was a decision made 20 some years ago, and it's so interbred into the software now, we still call it manufacturing orders. If you want to call it work orders, I'm okay with that. Some people even call it batch tickets. We have some people processing chemicals and stuff like that. They always want to call it batch tickets. Some folks call it travelers. I tend to use the word traveler as the printed out version of the manufacturing order, and so I'll differentiate with you on that as far as a traveler. And then some of the basics of what we do. Our software, we originally were designing it, it had to be able to manufacture and show the transactions that produced the items. And so we not only have an order, we have a manufacturing receipt to say how many were done and when, to track all that things. And so this is very pivotal to us as far as being as the basic part of our program. The building blocks. You all have items in what we have in the basic core and the item number, where you use an item everywhere, whether it's buying, selling, counting inventory, everything is item based. and you get tired of the word item probably sometimes. But in the item, you have the ability to set up a lot of parameters. The bill of materials, we just call it a materials tab. And you also have the labor task routing. When we create a manufacturing order, and there's 5 different ways to create a manufacturing order, but when you create a manufacturing order, it copies the bill of material from the master, being the item, at the time that the MO is created. This gives multiple benefits to us, and it's a big differentiator for us compared to like a QuickBooks or something like that, where their bill of material is exactly the same, whether it's on the item or in a manufacturing order. By doing a copy, you can do a substitution. You can modify the bill of material for this one production run. It also gives a snapshot in time as to what was the bill of material when that manufacturer order was created. Maybe we're looking back years in the history to see what that is. The same is true for the labor task routing, and you'll often see us have us shorted down to just task, and that's what we call it under the item. But just those steps that it takes to manufacture, to assemble, to machine, to weld, to whatever process that you do to convert those materials into the assembly. And remember, the items list, you're going to have both purchased items and manufactured items. But pretty much to be manufactured, it's got to be manufactured. So if there's a little bit of argument, are we going to purchase it or are we going to manufacture it? You're going to want to set up the item and the parameters as a manufactured item. Again, basic purpose, convert one item into another, whether the bill of material could be as simple as one thing. And so it's just, I'm converting 20 feet of pipe into 12-inch pieces of pipe. Okay, that's just converting from one item to another. That's the basic core. We add labor in a specified order. The task number is the order that it wants to print out, the order of operations. We've already talked about outside processing. It provides a costing bucket. For those that are more on the accounting side, we're dumping, whether it's labor, material, outside, all those things are getting thrown into there as a costing bucket that is there, for the history of the system, that you can look back. What did it cost us to make that batch of items? And then the other thing is from a manufacturing or a production load. How many things do we have in process right now? Where are they at? Managing the overall production. Options. We got options. This screen is found under the defaults in your company. And, what's the default warehouse under inventory will be used there as well. Now you do have a warehouse per user that will supersede that down in the manufacturing section. When I create a manufacturing order, what status do I want it to start out as? Now that's a small nuance, but it can be very helpful to say, well, I want it to be pending when it's created, and I want somebody else to release it. So that can be a systems choice that you make. Costing method, partial quantity receipt. This can be a bugaboo for us just because the system is having to guess when you do a partial completion. So let's say your manufacturing order was for 100 units. If you only complete 10 of those, we need to understand what method you want to approximate the cost. Because until you're done with the whole manufacturing order, we really don't know the exact cost. And so there's 3 choices there. There's problems and benefits to all of them. And so have that discussion with Daniel or myself if you haven't already had that one, because it's a great big deal if you're doing lots of partial completion. Repair orders, there's different status for that. And then we also have rework orders. If you haven't used those yet, it's a separate list to separate your manufacturing orders. And it just gives a way to say, I'm not going to copy the exact a bill of material. I'm not going to copy the task. I'm going to just copy and pull the main item in again. Default priority, again, that has to do with like released. It's like a scheduling scenario. You can see there's a huge list on the right-hand side. Those are under the options tab. Barcode labor. Do we want to have the stop show up as well? Include waste in the issuing to manufacturing. You all have the option when you're setting up your bill of materials to include a waste. And do you want it to include the waste percentage? Use employee pay rate over resource. This one bit me and 2 months ago or a month ago because we forgot to check this for one of our customers and we kept assuming it was going to use the standard rate. Well, if this is checked, it's going to look up what the employee's pay rate is. And if that's 0, guess what? It'll use 0. Copy item notes to the comments. That's just, do you want specification, things like that brought in. Edit the cost in the issuing of materials. Very rarely do we use that one. That's more of a job shop type thing. There's a bunch of prompts here for posting. You'll see that, and a lot of times we'll turn those off. Create labor records. That's like if you're not using data collection for labor, but you want to have it see the cost of it, we can check that box and automatically create labor records. Prevent editing of the MO number. It's just, do we want it to change? Yes or no? Traveler include documents. Now, few of our customers use this, and what it is if you add a document to the items tab, you can say to print it with the traveler, and so let's say it's a drawing or a specification. That will save you a lot of time pulling drawings and in the printing and processing step. Use the MO number for lot number. A lot of times basic lot numbering, they'll just use the lot number or the manufacturing order number. Auto include subassemblies. We rarely would use this. This is like if you have a multiple level assembly, it tries to pull up the subassemblies. Update hours in the item task. That's more of a system thing. It basically tries to average what your actual times and update your standard times. We'd prefer you set your standards manually, but that's an option for you. Prompt, there's a couple prompts for serial links. We do have it. If you do the conversion, it's automatically happening. Convert sales order to manufacturing order. That will show those on connected to the manufacturing order. Enable quantity on the barcode. That says, hey, prompt for how many you completed per task. Add overhead cost to manufacturing. There's a percentage thing you can do. Again, not very commonly used. Release before print, require for review before release. Those are like limitations or trying to scheme the method that people can do things, and so you can give certain people permission and not other people permission, so that one person has to maybe review it, and then once it's reviewed, then it can be printed. Variance log automatic. We do have a variance tab on the MO. I'll show you a little later, and that's basically to record changes. So long time ago when I did manufacturing stuff, we had to note when we did a variance, meaning we changed the bill of material for some reason. And so there's a log to note the changes that you've made to this batch. Prompting for the serial link, we talked about that a little bit already, but it can be trying to link to a single serial item. Requested due date to change, that's to propagate it back to the sales order when you change it in the MO, so that both people are on the same page as far as what date and time things are due. Item status, we require it to be normal. If we're using the change module, let's say under quality, that's one that you may want to check because it'll give you a warning or a pop-up. Backflush by sequence, if you've said what task and the material is used on, it can do that if you're using the labor data collection. Setup quantity, rare case, sometimes we have people when they're setting up a machine, they'll run a first article, and so that they wanted it to be able to prompt for quantity. And then we have collate options on printing labels. So if I touched on any hot button there, kind of note that, and we'll come back to that. But we just wanted to show that there's just all kinds of flavors and settings that you can do to make it work or operate a little bit different for you in your system. And there's questions that we ask a lot of these things when you're starting to use the system. Do you want to do labor? Do you want to record the labor? Do you have outside operations? Is it heat treating, painting, plating, things that you need to send something out, but it's still in the middle of the process. And so it's not the only thing that's done to the part. That could be a make from, but it's just a step in the process. Do you build to stock, to order, or design to order? Those all affect how you're going to use that manufacturing module. Length of time to process. If you're from the time you start making something to the finish making it is 1 day, well, number one, you're going to have a lot less value in WIP, and you're going to maybe process something quicker because the feedback loop is so fast from the start to finish, where maybe your process takes 6 months or a year to complete. Well, then we want to look at that because that's going to affect how you do things. Do you have multiple level assemblies, one assembly feeding to another assembly? Regulatory requirements, is there somebody requiring a bug stamp or a sign off on the paperwork, or do we have to keep records? Or a good way to do that, like, is to scan the MO Traveler when you're doing the finished production and attach it as a document. Tracking, lot serial, quality records. What part of the quality module are you using, and that's going to affect some of the manufacturing process. So from basic, very little, no labor, just material, to everything where we use, lots of different things in the system. It can vary greatly, and that comes through in the manufacturing order. I want to go to the live version just to walk through some of the screens. Any questions at this point? You have to unmute yourself, of course, if you're going to ask a question. I'm going to keep going. Danielle's usually the best to advocate for people, so you can always text out to the chat, and he can remind me that something's to cover. Forecasts, the first, very top of the manufacturing menu. If you're not using MRP, you're not using forecasts. Even if you're using forecasting, or even if you're using the MRP module, you may not be using forecasts, because when you go to a forecast, is literally just an item, a quantity due on a certain day, and it's just a placeholder for until you get a sales order to try to show the demand that's going to be on the system or something. And that's typically if you manufacture your own product. It's pretty rare if you're in a job shop mode. MRP, you can still use it, and we have several customers that use it even in a job shop mode. And the demand or the inputs to this calculator is the minimum stock forecast that we just talked about. There's a little note there, if it's prior to today, it'll get ignored. Open sales orders and then allocations, and you can choose what that is. And we might do a whole training class later on the MRP module. But the material requirements planning is basically a time-phased logic to say, on this day, we need so much material. Do you have it? Should you order it? I'm going to back up the lead time and tell you to order it prior to a certain day. So like I said, it's a less than half our customers use the MRP process. Think of it as just a big calculator that you press the button and it spits out, you should buy this, you should make this on this day or before this day. Reorder. Reorder point logic, we use it also under purchasing, and we touched on it over here under purchasing, but the manufacturing reorder, it is restricted to the manufactured items. Remember, when we were talking about the items itself, we designate here what type of the item it is. So we're designating for everything that's going to go through the manufacturing, we need to have it as a manufactured item. And from that. And then here's those task lists that we talked about that it's copied. And then here's the materials that are copied. Here's a whole bunch of settings for MRP. These are some used in that reorder that we are talking about as well, as far as minimum stock. And just remember, if you have multiple locations, you can set up some of this data per location. So back to reorder, it's telling me, at this warehouse, I have one on hand. It says that I'm -3 based on my demand, so I should go and make 10 more. We give you the ability here to do right-click, create the manufacturing order for this item with just a right-click. And so now in our manufacturing orders, we have another MO that we just created with a right-click function. Now, it's not that hard to create a manufacturing order, but it did save us a little bit of effort and time. And so it filled in the next number, it's assigned what the item and the quantity. And again, it did the copy here of the materials list and the task list. Now, as we talked about, we can do a new and we can add an item here to the bill of material for this particular run. We can say how much we're going to use of this item. And so we can modify this to show additional usage. Now, if let's say something got scrapped and we need more of it, we can also just overissue. So instead of issuing 10 of the fork, we could have issued 12. Let's say if 2 were damaged in that process. So just some basics. This is the manufacturing order. It goes from here, manufacturing orders. And then we just drilled into that specific order. So we have what we're going to make, whether we printed the travel or not, priority. We talked about released. They're different. These are pre-assigned statuses as to what it is. And it may be complete. We ran into this question the other day by one of our longtime users. This one's, it's done building it, but we haven't done the process to say that it was done. We haven't done the manufacturing receipt yet. So these are different statuses. My favorite one is pending, because that way, when I was running production, I would set it to pending when it was sitting on my desk before I'd handed it out to production. That way I could make differentiation between where that and how far it is in the process. Start date, the requested when do we want it done by. Here's the ability to link to a sales order. This is automatically filled in when you do a convert to the process. We even have kitting statuses. And so kitting usually refers to the process where we're pulling the items on the bill of materials, and we can say what status that we are in the kitting process as far as pulling these items. Comments, that's where we talked about you can copy information. This is just a big text area. You can type a whole bunch of stuff. Attributes. We talked about attributes on the previous discussion, so I won't go into real great detail here, but you can come up with that. Pre-assigned tracking information, so you can assign what the serial numbers and such before we get into the process. Oh, Daniel's power just went out. Daniel, the solar eclipse went through your area a few days ago, so he'll be back to us in a minute. Um, Variance, that's what I talked about, where we change the quantity. See how it changed something from 10 to 2 on this day, and it gives that information. That's kind of like a change log to show what has been modified during the manufacturing order itself. And then we can have criteria. This can be inspection criteria. This is also set up underneath the item, and it copies it. And then here we can have a place to actually record the values for the values for inspection. Documents that we talked about throughout our entire program, where you can literally drag and paste a document. If you do what I suggested as far as scanning your traveler at the end of the process in the manufacturing receipt, it will show up here, both on the receipt and on the itself. Data log throughout our program, that just says who created it and when. It's good for troubleshooting who changed this order and when did they do it. So we have some optional fields like project. You can group things. So any questions on the manufacturing order? Remember to unmute yourself to ask a question. Keep going. So under manufacturing, we have scheduling, which is that looking at the labor tasks, and we have a whole bunch of different options here. Again, probably is going to be a whole nother topic for discussion, where we have forward schedule, where you're looking at your capacity running forward. It's a hard nut to crack because things change so fast on the scheduling side. Sometimes we'll sometimes give you just a simple back schedule. We even have this screen I created for, when I was doing the production management, instead of handing out a what's next list, I'm sorry, I forgot to have data here. But if we could pick a specific person, and then it's going to show what's next on the list for them to do. And here what we were trying to do is skip, this is the non-barcode version, where you could literally highlight an item and click start, and it clocks you in to that process. Now, that user would need to have a computer functional to be able to choose from this in the manufacturing area. So that's one way and it'll constantly update what's next on that person's list based on that. And so there's several options under scheduling. So manufacturer orders list. Remember the list itself, it operates like all of our other list screens. And some people even make this show kind of a status because we can color code this, where if we change something to be of a status, we can it'll change color on us in the screen. And so sometimes it literally sorted by a column, by the due date or the start date, and this helps us give a crude schedule and a list of what should be worked on next. But we allows the production management folks to update what's going on, what's on hold, or what's waiting for material, things like that, to communicate across to other people. So there's some kind of functionality within this list screen just by being able to set that status and to organize by that. Remember, like all of our screens, you can filter by warehouse if you have multiple locations. Ad hoc orders. This is a strange nut to crack that I'll just kind of talk about, but not for everybody, but by ad hoc meaning we're just going to kind of make it on the fly. One of the best examples I can say is like where Daniel used to work. They had a laser or a flame cutting table where they'd cut 10 different items out at the same time. And so what we tried to do here was just give you the ability to put in an item and be able to pick something and then tell us what it's made out of, and you could make a whole list where it's different every time. And that's kind of what we're meaning by the ad hoc. So it's not following our standard structure of the bill of material and stuff. So we could produce maybe many items from one piece of material with one labor operation. I'm going to cough and I'm going to mute myself for a second here. Okay, so it's an interesting one if you do anything where you're producing many items from one material. It's a good thing to have a further discussion with us on. Shortage list. This is a great one where we're looking at what the manufacturing orders need, and you can do it by order. You can filter by some of these different filters to look at what materials are needed or short at this given point, date, and time to complete it. And so again, we use the filtering. We can use some of the filtering up in the top list here, or you can, filter there, or you can go all and you can filter by any of our columns, that we do like any other one of our list screens. So this is a good way to look at what's out there, what's holding us up from a big picture. We can look across multiple orders to see what's covering us. We look more like on a project basis, like a sales order or project. You have to define the project to group things by project, or a sales order if you converted. And I want to go back to that real quick. When we do have orders, that's one of the way to creating a manufacturing order from something. A sales order, again, it's just our customer's order entered into our system. There's a couple different options here, but we can convert manufacturing orders where we can say, yes, include this one. It's one saying it's already converted, so I can't. But you could have converted it from the sales order and create the manufacturing order as just one couple clicks rather than doing it manually. Rework orders. So this is the one where we kind of modify a bill of material where we take something and it's going to change the bill of material on something when we're doing it, because what we're really wanting to do is consume itself. So if we have something that was in process and there's a problem with it, we need to remake it. The bill of material really could be just the item itself. And so that's where, when it's a rework order, it doesn't pull in the standard bill of material. It does not bring in the standard task list. It just says rework. And so, but you still have the ability to say, I need to add more material to do the proper job of a rework. So from that standpoint, you can, but it will also consume those two bad frames that are in stock, and it will pull them out of stock when we issue them to this. So it pulls it in, adds additional cost to it, additional material, labor, whatever we choose. And then when it's complete, it goes back into stock as a reworked item. So again, that's something not everybody in our customer base uses, but if you do a lot of where you want to look at additional work or additional cost wants to fix something after the fact, after it's been made, please consider using the rework orders. Issue materials, that's just a basic function that the manufacturing order requires, is we need to consume that bill of materials. And so there's a couple different options. We have a mass issue and a miscellaneous issue, and then the basic new. Basic new just brings it up for one manufacturing order at a time. And so it's going to bring up what the list of materials are. There's quick cheat buttons like issue remaining to issue everything that we had. You can check, confirm that it's on stock. You could have also overissued and put in more than what was required if you needed to. You can add an additional item in the manufacturing issue. But really what we're trying to do is a transaction to consume or to transfer the inventory out of stock or out of inventory and put it into WIP, manufacturing in process. And so it goes into here. So it won't show in inventory anymore once it's been issued, but it will add it to the cost bucket and know what or how much was used on the manufacturing order. So there's a few, comments, documents, things like that that you can do. In this case, there's a use remnant. That's an option where we want to check that box. Then we're really going to use nothing that was in stock, but we're going to then zero out the required quantity. Basically, we had some in a remnant stack. We don't want to decrease our quantity on hand of that item, but we're kind of using it from the free pile. So that's what the remnant button does from that standpoint. You're also allowed to do a defect or a non-conformance type scenario why you had to issue more to the order. So this is a transaction. Consume that material. I've got lock control, so it's going to make me come back later and do that. And so I won't post that at this time. But manufacturing issue, that's for material. You also can see that screen depending on how you're using our system when you're doing the manufacturing receipts. But during the receipt process, if you have not already issued the material, the issue screen will pop up for you automatically. It's a form of back flushing where it's going to say, you told me you made so many, so you better have used some of those materials. So that's another, it's doing the same thing, it's just when is it doing it? Other costs. Not all of our customers use this, but it's a way. Had a scenario where we had to rent a forklift or we had to rent some extra equipment for us to make this thing when I worked at a large welding fabrication shop. And so this is the ability here where you can put in a date and just say on this manufacturing order, we had to dump a $500 rental, and that normally came out of our, office supplies. Sorry, lack of picking a better thing. And it will push in other costs, not material, not labor. It'll just take it from a GL and add it to that manufacturing order so as to try to capture that. Again, not used very often, but it can be very important if you have to do a special procedure or a special process for a particular construction. Again, that's more along the lines where you're like designed to order, things like that, where it's very specialized versus a consistent process. Receipts is the transaction to say, I had an order and now I need to complete it. And so I'm going to pick from the list of opens that I have to do it. To do a receipt, it has to be manufactured, can't be already closed. We did put some restrictions in there for reopening. You have to have a higher level of permission. And the basic thing is this stuff in yellow. Was there any scrapped and how many did I receive? And we go through a process where it's telling me how much material, how much labor. This shows you the estimated versus actual. And that's the ability to to find something that's basically see if you have a problem before you do the receipts, rather than when you're in after the fact. So, uh, so a lot of this content is just automatically filled in the date. The warehouse is the one of the manufacturing order, but you've got to fill in the quantity. It'll calculate the cost. It'll make you double check material before you do it. And then if it is lot or serial control, you have to make sure you have those assigned and the receipt process. And if you've done all of your receipts, meaning you've completed it, it will automatically close your manufacturing order. So think of the receipt process from the standpoint of it's similar to like a PO receipt. You've had a purchase order, now I got to say they're done. So whether that's receiving them into inventory or stores or getting it ready to ship out, you'd have to tell the system I'm done making it. And that's done with the receipts. Projects, we briefly touched on that, and that's just a grouping methodology. So you can group multiple manufacturing orders together into a project. And so that's good for reporting and those kind of purposes. There's a lot of setup information that before you do labor, you really need to have resources set up. If you're going to do labor, it's just stations. And resources are just basically areas of your production facility. It could be one area that's just assembly, but you could break it into different areas, and that's good for organization or scheduling purposes. It can also have different costing. And this is a big deal if you get into a variance or a large discrepancy in how much different people get paid in the different areas of the shop. So you're going to want to have those set up. And that's the building block thing that we usually have you set up before we even set up the manufactured item. Now, stations underneath there, that's not required before you set up the item, but it is more important for scheduling to say how much capacity that we have in a particular area. So what days are we working, how many hours, things like that. It's very much a scheduling area. And with templates, that's just to make it easier to kind of predefine things. Attributes we talked about before, and variance codes. That's, again, if we're going to do a variance, we can have predefined reasons for why we're having a variance. And then we have our standard queries, charts, all that kind of stuff that we can do. In addition, we have the reports over on the manufacturing area. And please don't forget, almost all of these have right-click functionality. So if you're focused on the manufacturing orders, there's a right-click to print the traveler, to print labels, to print job costing. A lot of things come off that right-click functionality. So different methods that we can use through the shop. You can see there's different choices you can make, whether you're a private label manufacturer, you make your own product, to a job shop. A lot of that difference comes into how you use the manufacturing module. So now I've talked plenty, and if anybody has questions, I'd love to answer it. I'll go back to the program just so that I can show or explain something better. Ready to unmute yourself if you are going to ask a question.
Hey, Claire, did you cover any of the scheduling screens? I had my power go out for just a brief time.
Yeah, I tried to make excuses for you while you bailed on everybody. But I did go through, like, one of the schedules. I said we probably could do a whole session on the schedule screens. And basically, it's a different way that breaks out the tasks, like backwards schedule, and to what should be done first. And we even have TV screens set up scheduling. We take the same kind of information per area, and you can display them throughout the areas of the shop. But the backward schedules are simplest. The forward schedule takes more effort. And I also referenced that some people even use just the basic orders list as their schedule. But what we found is everybody schedules very differently, so challenge us with that. And then we've written lots of custom queries for producing schedules or grouping things the way you'd want to, the way you think about it. Other
We've
people,
even made different, different TVs throughout the shops show different information based on what you need them to see in that area of the shop. So those are things that can be set up and customized.
questions from the pool, please. Remember to unmute yourself. Oh, Daniel, I must have put everybody to sleep today.
Hi, Toy here.
Hey, Toy.
Yeah, just because we already discussed about the variant of the thing, but today you walk me through, and then I can see that we can see the variant of the production by the time that we do the receipt for one work order, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah,
correct. And that's where when you're doing the manufacturing receipt, that's an important thing to get people aware of, especially your production folks, is to at least take a look at this because you can catch a lot of large mistakes. But just
yeah,
comparing the estimated value to the actual and to see what it's calculating, because if it's, a multitude or a factor of 10 off or something like that, you might, you could catch it and we could fix it before you throw it
yeah.
into inventory at the wrong cost.
So I am thinking of, because we have the request for quote here, and whereby we have to estimate the cost before we actually do it. So if we can convert, you said that we have a function to convert the sell order into the manufacturing order. Somehow that we can convert the quotation into the work order and use that one to compare again the actual production cost to get the variance of that one. And by doing that, we know exactly whether we do the quotation correctly or not correctly at the time that we do the good receipt. That is one thing.
Right. And that's where it's so important to, when you're typically your materials isn't as hard because you put in materials, but you need to have on your purchased items, you need to have a standard cost assigned to the purchased items. And then for your manufactured items, you'd want to show what the hours are. And last time I was at your facility, we talked to your production folks about updating, the run hours and the setup hours. And one real quick note on that hours is the setup time for standard cost is divided by this batch quantity. So if we had 4 hours to set up this operation for welding, our standard cost is going to divide it by this 10, assuming that it's like our standard batch size. When you do the actual batch size, then it's going to just spread it over whatever the actual is, but that's for your standard cost. So just keep that in mind of your setup hours. But if you don't have run hours, which would be time per part, and setup hours, and if you didn't have costs per the area or the resources, that's going to be the math that's going to be calculating the estimated cost. Is going to be based on what the standard hours are and your standard rate costs are.
Yeah, the routing. Yeah, the resource routing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a big
That is,
deal.
yeah. So I got the idea. So that I'm thinking of how to apply that one into Gino. The number two is that right now we stop at the production variant. But they are another level because that's one irrelevant for the production manager to look at every end of day or whatever when he finished the work order. But a company, by the end of the month, we want to look at the cost of goods sold variant. But because after we do the receipt, it become one line, cost of finished good. And then they know such kind of variant available for us to look at the corporate level. I just want to reconfirm that one so that we can think together how to carry over into the cost of goods sold.
If I understood right, you can look at what you should be stocking or what should be made. The reorder screen that looks at whether it should be made, and then as far as end of month, one important difference in the manufacturing module is the WIP value, and again, that's as of a certain date, and so that's meant so as to for us in the accounting side of the world to be able to look at what our net value is in the GL as of a certain date. Sorry, I don't have a good example here, but this report, as much as this is an accounting report, it really needs to be owned by the production folks as to yes, these manufacturing orders are in stock or in process at the month end. So a good procedure is to just have somebody in the production at least review the manufacturing order to say, yep, those are still current. We're still in process on those, because if not, it throws not only potentially the quantity that we're looking to populate and fill, it can also throw the accounting side of things off. Other folks with questions?
Claire, you, I think, have a bunch of kind of canned reporting queries that you can run. Is there a couple that are your favorite that you would recommend the management team look at frequently?
Boy, that's a tough one because for each company we will recommend different things typically. I mean, one of my favorites right here is that you can get job costs directly from the screen. And so depending on how many times you've made this item, it'll show you every time you've made it what it projected cost you. And so that's less of a report than kind of just a screen that you can look at. But the one that we've used the most is probably, when you say, Daniel, the job cost report.
Yeah, I started recommending that to Toy as well, and comparing actuals back to what you think you quoted. You know, you can look at your cost on your item versus the job cost report.
Yeah.
Another one, Nikki, that I like a lot is under manufacturing and totals. There's 4 or 5 different tabs in there, and we use manufacturing orders by resource a lot to see what's coming down the pipeline. I think it's the last tab there, Claire. And then
I don't have
we have a capacity versus a query, or I think you have it as a chart, the capacity versus the demand. This is kind of good to be able to see, you know, if you're overloaded. It depends on how you've got your stuff set up, if it's just resources, or as far as stations, you know, to see capacity, you want stations, but. And then I've got a lot of customers that use serial numbers. So what I've done, Nikki, is create like serial based manufacturing and shipping reports to say, you know, they want to look at it when a specific serial got created or shipped and things like that. And so a lot of our manufacturing queries are custom per customer.
A great question.
Awesome. Thanks. Can I ask one more? And maybe this is answered by your last one. So if I wanted to just check the prices for one statement of work, if you will, and just confirm them compared to the contract that just came in to make sure that I didn't add a zero somewhere. How would I look in bulk at the prices for a particular statement of work? Let's say pigtails or, I was trying to think of something that we could pick. You probably don't have anything like that in your system right here, Claire, but I was just trying to think of like one type of part.
Yeah, I would look at the job costing just to compare previous runs. Some of it because some of your data is new. This may or may not be good, but it would at least give you, based on both production runs, that it has been built. But you might go back to, I think we added it from the status inquiry screen. You can look at that item, go to receipts, and then you can actually print the job cost from here. So you could pick a specific run, let's say our last run, since there's more current data on it. You can do a right click from the status screen to get you job costing.
Awesome. And then on that same note, what if all the prices are going to go up for an item Jan 1? Is there an easy way to do that?
Yeah, there's a couple different things. There's price and then there's cost. I try to always talk for pricing. If you're going to increase the cost, that's kind of not the manufacturing module. It's more on the sales side of things. There's a bunch of utilities that you can say down here, update price based on current price, or update the price based on current cost. So those are kind of across the board for things. But one way to do it in the rough sample is, if you've got your standard cost reasonable, is just really just do a comparison between your average cost and your standard cost columns in comparison to your unit price. So literally, you can do some good comparison just from the items list itself. But one point of note is, I would recommend that you do a like calculate all standard cost function that goes through and updates the standard cost for every manufactured item. It rolls it up. So let's say if you were having a cost change, you might have to go into that manufacturing other and then resources and change your hourly rates. Now these are cost rates, not what your bill rate is, but you might have to go into this. And as soon as you do this and you recalculate the standard for all items, this column here will change based on you changing the rate of the production area. So look at this under other utilities, calc all standard cost function, so that to try to either do it by a group of items or by a type.
Awesome. Thank you.
One cool trick, Nikki, is if you run a job cost report from the item screen versus the work order screen. The work order screen just gives you that work order, but from the item screen, it gives you like the last 10 jobs, I think. So you can kind of see them all side by side.
Awesome. Thanks.
Well, I think we've used up our hour, Daniel. We will publish this. If you want to share this with somebody else, we'll share it out. Usually takes a day or two for it to get out there. We appreciate everybody joining us today. It was a great turnout. If you do have a topic that you'd like us to touch on in our monthly seminars, feel free to email Daniel or I for us to add it to the list. Sometimes we try to go very specific, and sometimes we try to do like today, where we're very broad, going over entire module. But thanks again for your business, and we enjoy working with you. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.